Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take the source material you've sent us and, well, we dive right in to pull out the key insights. Today, we're plunging into the market for Nafamostat Mesylate. Now, if this compound isn't quite on your radar yet, our source highlights it as increasingly important. Think anti-inflammatory and antiviral treatments. And the source guiding us today, its data and projections, are straight from cognitive market research. So our mission here is pretty clear. Unpack the trends, the big figures, and where this is all heading. We want to give you a clear picture of the global and regional market looking right out to 2033. Think of it as your focus shortcut, really, to getting a handle on this specific bit of the healthcare market. Okay, so let's unpack this. Starting big picture, right? The global market numbers presented in the source. Back in 2021, the market for Nafamostat Mesylate, it was valued at $308.6 million.
Right.
Now, fast forward just a few years, say 2025, and the projection, it hits $438.8 million.
Mm-hmm.
But here's where it gets really interesting. By 2033, this market is expected to nearly double again from that 2025 number.
Yeah.
Yeah, reaching $887.3 million.
Okay, that's pretty significant growth we're talking about. Putting that into context, that translates to a global compound annual growth rate, a CAGR of 9.2%.
9.2%.
Exactly. And the source calls that a strong trajectory. I mean, looking at nearly tripling the market size in, just over a decade, it's hard to argue with that.
Definitely not.
And the report specifically points to the compound's growing demand. It's needed in various clinical applications worldwide, you see, driven by its benefits, particularly as an anticoagulant and an anti-inflammatory agent.
That makes sense.
So this kind of consistent, strong CAGR, it really reflects the molecule's increasing clinical relevance and, its adoption globally.
Okay, so armed with that global picture, let's zoom in. Let's get regional. The source gives us a really detailed breakdown and it reveals some interesting dynamics. Let's kick off with North America. Seems like steady, solid growth here.
Yeah, that's right.
The projection shows it more than doubling, going from $70 million back in 2021 up to $194.7 million by 2033. That holds a regional TGR of about 9%.
And within North America, the data shows the United States, it remains the largest chunk, growing steadily, about 8.6% CGR there.
Okay.
But if you look a bit closer at the source material, Canada and especially Mexico, that's where you see the real speed in this region.
Okay.
Canada's CGR is notably higher at 10.1%. But Mexico, it really stands out. It has the highest KGR mentioned anywhere in this report. Quite impressive, actually, at 12.7%.
12.7%, wow.
Yeah. And the source seems to link this faster growth in certain countries to factors like healthcare expansion and innovation driving that adoption.
Right.
So while the U.S. is definitely the heavyweight, you've got places like Mexico acting as these sort of high momentum engines.
Interesting dynamic. Okay, so from North America, let's head across the Atlantic. Europe, what's the story there, according to the source?
Well, the source pegs this market for a pretty similar overall growth to North America, actually.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, going from $92.9 million in 2021 up to an expected $258.9 million by 2033. Also looking at a steady 9% CAGR.
So consistent there, too.
Exactly. And looking at the individual countries in Europe, the data shows pretty consistent growth across the major economies. You've got Germany projected to reach about $50 million by 2033. And the UK hitting around $35.6 million. It's also worth noting that the source's figures show growth extending even to smaller markets like Luxembourg, expected to more than double. And collectively, the rest of Europe segment, that contributes significantly too. So it paints a picture of broad established growth, maybe less explosive than some other regions we might touch on, but very reliable.
Reliable, established growth. Okay, got it. Now let's look at the Asia-Pacific region, APAC. The source specifically uses the word energetic to describe the pace here.
Energetic, yeah. And the numbers definitely back that description up.
So from $103.1 million in 2021, this market is forecasted to reach a, pretty substantial $329.2 million by 2033.
Huge jump.
Huge jump. And it's supported by a higher regional CGR too, 10%.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating here isn't just the overall pace, it's how widespread that energy is. I mean, China leads in total size, no surprise there, projected to reach $56.8 million by 2033. That's a strong 10.4% CAGR.
Okay.
But the real standout, in terms of sheer speed, according to this data, it's India.
India.
Yeah, showing the fastest growth mentioned in the entire report, an 11.2% CAGR. It's projected to grow from like $3.2 million to $11.5 million.
Well, okay, that is fast.
It really is. And the momentum is broad. South Korea, Australia both projected to more than triple their 2021 revenues by 2033. And Southeast Asia also contributes significantly with a 10.2% CAGR.
So that whole region is just booming in this space.
It really seems like it. This region clearly shows a strong correlation between that healthcare expansion factor the source mentioned as a driver and just, well, rapid market adoption.
Makes sense. Okay, heading down to South America now. The source indicates some encouraging trends there, too. Maybe smaller in total size than the regions we've just talked about, but still showing healthy growth.
That's right. Brazil, for instance, it's set to grow from $8.1 million in 2021 to around $22.4 million by 2033. That's a 9.1% CAGR.
Still strong.
Still very strong. And Argentina follows pretty...
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai.
Still strong.
Still very strong. And Argentina follows pretty closely behind that.
Right.
And, this really aligns with that overall trend of rapid adoption that the source mentions for Latin America in general. It seems to be part of that bigger picture, that increasing clinical relevance driven by the molecule of benefits. It's clearly extending into these emerging markets across South America now.
Good to see. Okay, finally, a quick look at the Middle East and Africa. The source describes the growth here as maybe slightly more modest compared to others, but still consistent.
Yeah, modest but consistent seems fair based on the numbers.
So Egypt, for example, shows growth from $3.1 million to about $6.5 million with a 6.3% CAGR. Mm-hmm. And noting that regional difference in growth rates compared to, say, APAC or Latin America, it is quite insightful. Based only on the numbers presented in this source, the Middle East and Africa show a slower pace.
Okay.
Which, could suggest maybe different stages of market maturity or perhaps different adoption rates for Nafamostat Mesylate compared to those faster growing areas.
Right, different speed to different places.
Yeah.
So, okay, we've gone around the globe. What does this all mean for you, looking at this source material from Cognitive Market Research? I think the key takeaway is, well, it's pretty unambiguous, isn't it?
Seems very clear.
The Nafamostat Mesylate market is on a really firm upward trajectory globally, projected to nearly triple in size by 2033. That's the headline.
Absolutely.
And the regional data, it tells the story of how that's happening. We're seeing this rapid adoption and energetic growth, particularly in Asia Pacific and Latin America.
Yeah, those really stand out.
But that's balanced by, steady, solid growth in the more established markets like North America and Europe.
A mix of dynamics. Exactly. And as the source points out repeatedly, the core drivers seem to be the molecule's benefits, that anticoagulant, anti-inflammatory action. That's what's fueling demand, especially where healthcare infrastructure is expanding and innovation is being embraced.
Yeah, and if we connect this to the sort of the bigger picture, this analysis, which comes straight from the source you provided, it really highlights how specific therapeutic compounds like this can have such distinct market dynamics. They're influenced by regional healthcare priorities, infrastructure development, economic growth.
All those factors playing together.
Precisely. Which actually raises an important question for you, the listener, to think about. Given these strong projections and these really clear regional differences in the pace of growth, particularly that energetic rise in APAC and Latin America, what do you think this kind of market shift signals about the future landscape? For anti-inflammatory or antiviral treatments more broadly, globally, what specific opportunities or maybe challenges might this kind of rapid but regionally varied market expansion create down the line?
Yeah, definitely a lot to think about there. And remember, all the numbers and insights we've shared today, they come directly from the data provided by Cognitive Market Research. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us into these, pretty fascinating market trends. We're taking a close look at a compound that's, it's seeing a real surge of interest, Nafamostat Mesylate. And drawing heavily on information from market research within these sources, we're going to pull out the critical details. Its market dynamics, where it's headed, what's driving its growth.
And what's holding it back, too, the restraints.
Right, and the key trends shaping its future.
And what's really striking, I think, from the material you sent, is that while it might sound like a pretty specific pharmaceutical molecule, the sources actually reveal it's surprisingly versatile. It seems poised for a much bigger role than maybe its history would suggest.
Okay, so let's start with the basics then. According to the sources you gave us, What exactly is nafamostat mesylate?
Well, at its core, the research describes it as a synthetic serine protease inhibitor.
Okay, protease inhibitor, like molecular scissors.
Yeah, think of protease as kind of like that, molecular scissors involved in lots of different body processes. And traditionally, nafamostat has been used to inhibit some of these specific scissors, um, particularly for conditions like pancreatitis
Right.
and also disseminated intravascular coagulation, which people often just call DIC.
Okay, so that's the history, critical care stuff. But the material you shared points to accelerated market growth happening right now. So why the sudden momentum? What are the key forces driving this?
The research is pretty clear on this. The main engine, really, is its expanding therapeutic range. It's not just stuck in those traditional uses anymore. It's being actively looked at, investigated, for a whole array of new applications. Antivirals, for instance.
Antivirals. Interesting.
Yeah, and broader anticoagulation, so beyond just DIC, and also anti-inflammatory therapies.
So it's less about its old niche and more about this newfound flexibility.
Exactly. The sources really highlight its potential as a versatile tool. Because its ability to inhibit these specific serine proteases, it allows for targeted intervention in really complex disease pathways.
Makes sense.
And this is especially clear in its role in inhibiting viral entry into cells. That mechanism got a lot of attention, as the sources point out, during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Right, I remember hearing about it then. TMPRSS2 inhibitor?
Precisely. But beyond viruses, the material also notes it's being evaluated for various types of cancer and other inflammatory diseases too. So a much wider scope.
Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting for me. The sources also put a huge emphasis on its role in emergency and critical care settings. It's not just about new uses.
Absolutely not. Its fast-acting anticoagulant and anti-inflammatory effects make it, according to the research we looked at, almost indispensable in ICUs and during, say, complex surgical procedures.
Indispensable is a strong word.
It is, but the data seems to back it up. It specifically calls out widespread use in ECMO procedures. That's the heart-lung bypass machine.
Right, life support.
And also in hemodialysis. And what's significant, the sources indicate this isn't just in, top-tier hospitals. Its adoption as a standard part of critical care is apparently increasing even in developing health systems.
That is significant. And what about the broader trend, the one we've all seen since the pandemic, repurposing existing drugs?
Yes. That's the third major driver the sources identify. The COVID-19 pandemic really did reshape pharmaceutical R&D, didn't it?
Definitely.
It led to this massive acceleration in looking at old drugs for new tricks, basically.
Yeah.
Drug repurposing. And nafamostat was, perfectly positioned for this wave.
So right place, right time.
Sort of. And the research shows companies, institutions globally are pouring resources into clinical trials right now to broaden its medical footprint across a whole range of conditions.
Okay, so powerful drivers pushing it forward, expanding uses, critical care staple, drug repurposing. But, as the information you provided makes clear, no drug's journey is ever simple. What are the major roadblocks? The restraints outlined in the sources impacting its market.
Well, the material points to several key challenges. First off, there are pretty significant hurdles related to high production costs and the complex synthesis required.
Meaning it's hard to make.
And expensive.
Yeah.
Manufacturing nafamostat apparently demands exceptional purity and sticking to incredibly rigorous quality standards. This means you need sophisticated infrastructure, higher capital investment, higher input costs.
What translates to?
Which, according to the sources, can definitely limit supply, especially in markets where the profit margins might be lower. It's a cost issue.
Okay, so making it to the required standard is expensive.
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai.
Margins might be lower. It's a cost issue.
Okay, so making it to the required standard is expensive. What about getting it approved for all these new potential uses?
And that leads right into the second major restraint, the regulatory hurdles.
The red tape.
Exactly. While drug repurposing sounds efficient, navigating the strict approval processes from bodies like the FDA here in the U.S. or the EMA in Europe, it's lengthy, and it's incredibly expensive.
Even for a drug that's been around.
Even for a molecule with an established safety profile, yes. The need for comprehensive clinical trials for each new indication significantly delays market access. And the sources argue this can actually suppress innovation, even when there's growing clinical evidence for new uses.
Frustrating. And finally, the sources highlighted a challenge with sort of global reach.
That's right. The research points to limited awareness and accessibility, particularly in lower-income regions, as a significant drag on its global spread.
How so?
Well, the sources state pretty clearly that in many parts of the world, healthcare systems, especially critical care, are just underfunded. They often lack the necessary infrastructure to effectively bring in and use novel therapeutics like Nafamostat.
So the innovation is there, but the system can't always adopt it.
Precisely.
Mhm.
And this results in this frustrating lag in adoption, creating a really stark gap between the pharmaceutical innovation happening and the actual real-world health impact.
Okay, so we've got these strong forces driving growth expanding uses, critical care role, repurposing balanced against these real-world complexities, cost, regulation, access. Looking ahead now, what key trends do the sources identify that signal promise? What's shaping the future for Nafamostat?
One of the most compelling trends highlighted, I think, is the emergence of combination therapies.
Combining it with other drugs.
Exactly. The research indicates scientists are increasingly exploring pairing Nafamostat with other agents. The examples given were drugs like remdesivir or maybe Camostat
Right.
to create fixed-dose combinations. The idea that is to significantly boost therapeutic efficacy, particularly in antiviral treatments
Yeah.
and potentially in oncology as well.
Interesting. So synergy.
Yeah, and the sources suggest this trend could actually change how certain treatment protocols are designed down the line,
Yeah.
making therapies more potent, more targeted.
That sounds like a smart strategic move, leveraging its specific mechanism. What else is on the horizon, trend-wise?
Well, another key trend is increased government and institutional funding for antiviral research.
Makes sense post-pandemic.
Absolutely. The sources link this directly to the global push, post-COVID, to be better prepared for future outbreaks. And molecules like Nafamostat are seen as prime candidates for, say, inclusion in strategic stockpiles.
For national preparedness.
And also for long-term research portfolios, specifically because of its ability to inhibit TMPRSS2, that key molecular scissor viruses use. It makes it really relevant for preparing for future viral threats.
Got it. And how is the industry itself helping it spread, despite the access issues?
Good question. The material points to a growing number of strategic collaborations and licensing agreements focused specifically on Nafamostat.
So companies teaming up.
Exactly. These deals, according to the research, are playing a crucial role in accelerating the compound's global reach. They're helping to break down some of those market entry barriers we talked about and potentially speed up regulatory processes in different regions.
How?
Well, you see companies partnering across borders. They combine maybe regional market knowledge with shared R&D infrastructure. It's a push for global adoption, basically.
Okay. So bringing this all together, what does this mean for you listening?
Understanding the journey of Nafamostat Mesylate, from its origins in critical care to where it is now a molecule that's really central to cutting-edge research and even global health strategy. It gives you valuable insight.
It really does?
It illustrates that complex path drugs take from the lab bench to the patient bedside. It shows that fascinating intersection of global health crises like the pandemic and pharmaceutical innovation.
And it also highlights those persistent challenges of global health equity we discussed.
Absolutely. And underscores the really exciting potential of versatile molecules like this for tackling future health challenges. So just to wrap up our deep dive into the sources you shared, Nafamostat Mesylate is clearly transforming. It's moving well beyond its established role in critical care. It's becoming a key player in innovation, in research, and potentially in global health preparedness strategies.
And based on the material, there's a strong, you could say optimistic, market outlook. It's driven by those expanding uses we talked about and promising trends like the combination therapies and these strategic global partnerships.
However, and this is important, this potential is definitely tempered by those significant real-world constraints outlined clearly in the sources, things like the high cost and complexity of production,
Right.
the friction you get from regulatory hurdles, and those persistent challenges of ensuring it's actually accessible, especially in lower-income regions.
Still, the overall picture presented in the source material is one of, well, immense potential. If the current momentum keeps up, Nafamostat really does appear poised to become a staple, not just in emergency medicine, but maybe at the forefront of new pharmaceutical pipelines, too.
Which leaves us and you with a question worth pondering, I think. Considering the success and the potential of repurposing drugs like Nafamostat Mesylate, to quickly address health crises. What are the most significant ethical and maybe economic challenges we really need to overcome to ensure that promising therapeutics like this one, regardless of their origin or their new application, are truly accessible globally, especially given those production and regulatory hurdles that are so clearly highlighted in the research?
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai.